There is a pattern that appears in the lives of men who are otherwise intelligent, otherwise self-aware, otherwise capable of genuine care. A pattern so consistent and so specific that once you see it, you cannot unsee it. These men do not fail at relationships because they are callous or indifferent. They fail because they love in the wrong direction. They fall with intense and apparently genuine feeling for a woman who embodies something they cannot name. And then, over months or years, they proceed to systematically destroy the very thing they fell for. They demand that she be more available, more understanding, more patient. They are disappointed when she is tired or distracted, or simply human in ways that interrupt the quality of presence they require from her. They idealize her completely in the beginning and are baffled and resentful when reality fails to sustain the idealization. And when the relationship ends, as it almost inevitably does, they carry the specific grief of a man who feels he has lost something irreplaceable, without understanding that what he lost was never entirely her. This pattern is not limited to men who are obviously troubled or psychologically unsophisticated. It appears with particular frequency in men who have done some degree of inner work, men who can speak fluently about their feelings, who value depth and authenticity in their relationships, who genuinely want to love well. The sophistication does not protect against the pattern. In some ways, it makes it more difficult to see, because the man can narrate his experience of the relationship with apparent insight, while remaining entirely unaware of the deeper mechanism driving it. He can describe his partner's qualities with precision and his grief at losing her with genuine emotion, and still not understand that he was, throughout the relationship, relating primarily to an image rather than a person. Carl Jung named this image. He called it the Anima, the feminine psychological dimension present in every man's psyche, the inner figure through whose lens every man perceives and relates to the women in his life. The Anima is not simply an internalized memory of women he has known, though it is partly that. It is an autonomous psychological structure, a living image with its own qualities, its own moods, its own agenda, that acts as a mediator between a man's conscious identity and the deeper layers of his unconscious. When it is undeveloped and unexamined, the Anima does not remain an inner figure. It projects itself outward onto real women and transforms them, in the man's perception, into carriers of its own contents. The woman he falls in love with is real, but what he falls in love with is not entirely her. It is her plus everything his Anima has placed upon her. And that addition is, in most cases, more than any real woman can carry. The consequences of this projection are not simply romantic disappointment, though romantic disappointment is reliably among them. The unexamined Anima shapes a man's emotional life, his creative output, his relationship with his own interior, his capacity for genuine intimacy, and the quality of his psychological development across the second half of life. Jung considered the integration of the Anima to be one of the central tasks of male psychological maturity, not optional, not peripheral, but as essential to genuine wholeness as any other dimension of the individuation process. The man who never develops a conscious relationship with his Anima does not simply have relationship problems. He remains, in a specific and significant sense, psychologically incomplete, cut off from the feeling function, from the creative depths, from the capacity for genuine relatedness that the Anima, when integrated, makes available. This video is for men who recognize the pattern, in themselves or in someone they know, and want to understand it more honestly than the available frameworks typically allow. It is also for anyone, regardless of gender, who has been on the other side of this pattern, who has been the woman onto whom an unexamined Anima was projected, who has felt the specific disorientation of being loved intensely for qualities that were never entirely theirs, and then blamed for failing to sustain an image they never agreed to carry. Jung's insights into the Anima are among the most practically useful things he ever developed, and the least understood. What follows is an honest account of what those insights actually mean, and what they require of a man who takes them seriously. If you have already encountered the concept of the Anima in previous videos, in Jung's own writing, or in the broader literature of depth psychology, what follows is going to take you further than any introduction can reach. And if the concept is new to you, What follows will give you everything you need to understand why it may be the most important psychological idea you have never been taught. The anima in Jung's framework is the feminine psychological dimension that exists in the male psyche as a structural feature, not as a cultural imposition, not as a learned preference, but as an inherent aspect of psychological organization that is present from the beginning and that develops or fails to develop across the course of a man's life. It is the bridge between the conscious ego and the unconscious, the inner figure through whom the deeper layers of the psyche communicate with the surface mind. The anima is not the same as a man's concept of women, though it influences that concept profoundly. It is not the same as his sexual preferences, though it shapes them. It is not the same as his emotional life, though it is the primary source of his emotional depths. It is an autonomous psychological entity, a complex in Jung's technical language that has its own character, its own moods, its own consistent way of appearing in dreams, fantasies, and projections. It is experienced when it makes itself felt, not as a thought but as a mood, as a sudden, inexplicable melancholy, a wave of longing without clear object, a feeling of being drawn towards something just beyond the reach of articulation. These moods are the anima speaking, and in a man who has no conscious relationship with this inner figure, they speak without being heard, driving behavior from beneath the level of awareness, shaping choices and responses that the man experiences as simply how he feels, rather than as communications from an autonomous inner dimension. The anima takes its initial character primarily from a man's experience with his mother, or more precisely, from the quality of the relational field that surrounded him in his earliest years. The mother does not create the anima, which is an archetypal structure that would exist regardless, but she profoundly shapes its particular coloring, its emotional tone, its characteristic moods, its specific ways of relating. A man whose early experience of the feminine was nurturing and reliably present will have an anima with a different quality than a man whose early experience was volatile, withholding, or anxiously overprotective. The anima also absorbs the qualities of significant women encountered throughout development: sisters, early loves, teachers, the cultural images of femininity that the surrounding environment presents as models. By the time a man reaches adulthood, his anima is a richly complex inner figure, shaped by decades of experience, carrying both the wounds and the gifts of everything that figure has absorbed. Jung identified 4 stages of anima development, 4 levels at which the anima can function, ranging from the most primitive and undifferentiated to the most integrated and spiritually alive. At the first level, the anima is purely biological, associated with the capacity for life and procreation, functioning at the level of instinct and physical attraction. At the second level, she becomes romantic, associated with the idealized beloved, the muse, the figure of impossible longing that appears in myth and literature as Helen of Troy or Dante's Beatrice. At the third level, she becomes a carrier of spiritual devotion, associated with the Virgin Mary in Western tradition, with compassion, with the capacity for selfless love. At the fourth and most developed level, she becomes Sophia, wisdom itself, the capacity for deep intuition, for creative insight, for genuine relatedness to the mystery of existence. Most men, Jung observed, never develop beyond the second level, and the consequences of that arrested development are what this video is about. The crucial point, the one that makes everything else in this video intelligible, is that the anima does not remain inside. It projects. When a man has not developed a conscious relationship with his inner feminine dimension, that dimension does not wait patiently for him to attend to it. It reaches outward, into the world, and attaches itself to real women, transforming them in the man's perception into carriers of its own contents. The woman who triggers this projection does not need to do anything in particular to trigger it. She simply needs to carry certain qualities, certain ways of moving, speaking, being in the world, that resonate with the anima's own character. And when the projection lands, the man does not experience it as a projection. He experiences it as falling in love, as finally, completely recognizing someone, as the feeling that this particular woman is different from all others, more real, more significant. more uniquely herself. What he is encountering, in part, is himself. The moment of anima projection is not gradual. It is sudden, a recognition so immediate and so complete that it bypasses rational evaluation entirely. The man who experiences it does not think his way into the feeling. He is simply without prelude in it. She is across the room, or across a table, or on the other side of a conversation, and something in him orients toward her with an urgency that feels less like desire and more like necessity. Like something that was incomplete has suddenly found its missing piece, like a lock encountering its key. This feeling of inevitability, of fated recognition, is one of the most reliable signatures of anima projection, and it is also one of the most seductive because it feels more real, more significant, more meaningful than ordinary attraction. It carries the weight of the unconscious behind it. It draws on decades of longing that the man may not even know he has been carrying. What the man is responding to in these first moments is not primarily the woman herself, though she is genuinely there, genuinely real, genuinely carrying her own particular qualities. He is responding to the resonance between her actual qualities and the qualities of his inner anima figure. Picture it concretely. She says something offhand, a single sentence about a book she loves or the way she describes loss, or simply the quality of silence she holds before answering, and something in him stops completely. Not because the sentence was extraordinary, because it matched something interior that he has been carrying without knowing he was carrying it. That resonance is the projection landing, and once it lands, she will be perceived through the lens of that image for as long as the projection holds, not entirely as herself, but as the living embodiment of everything his own unconscious has been waiting to find. The early stages of a relationship organized around anima projection have a specific quality that anyone who has lived them will recognize. Everything feels heightened, more vivid, more significant, more charged with meaning than ordinary life. The woman seems to understand him in ways no one has understood him before, and this feeling is not entirely illusory, because the anima does carry genuine knowledge of the man's deepest needs and capacities. She seems to bring out something in him that he rarely accesses, a depth of feeling, a creative aliveness, a capacity for presence that his ordinary life does not produce. He is more himself around her, or more precisely, he is more in contact with dimensions of himself that the anima mediates. The relationship feels not like the beginning of something, but like the restoration of something, like returning to a wholeness that was always his but has been unavailable. This is the gift of the projection at its best, the genuine psychological opening it produces. The anima, when projected onto a real woman who genuinely carries some of its qualities, does create real access to the man's own depths. The feeling function opens, the creative capacity becomes available. The capacity for genuine emotional presence increases. These are not illusions. They are genuine psychological developments, facilitated by the charged relational field the projection creates. The problem is not that the projection produces these openings. The problem is that it produces them through an external figure, rather than through a direct inner relationship, which means they are available only as long as the projection holds, and unavailable as soon as it dissolves. The man who has accessed his depth through a woman rather than directly has not actually developed the depth. He has borrowed it, and borrowing, unlike genuine ownership, must eventually be repaid. The dissolution of the projection, which is inevitable because no real woman can sustain indefinitely the weight of an inner figure's image, is experienced as loss, as disappointment, sometimes as betrayal. She has changed. She is not who he thought she was. The qualities that made her feel so extraordinary have faded or revealed themselves as less than they seemed. What has actually happened is not that she has changed, though she has revealed more of herself, and more of herself inevitably includes dimensions that do not correspond to the anima's image. What has happened is that the projection has partially dissolved, and he is beginning to see her as a person rather than as a figure. And the person, however genuinely valuable and genuinely worthy of love, is not the same as the image. The gap between them, between the real woman and the inner figure he has been relating to, is where most relationships organized around unconscious anima projection eventually founder. The unexamined anima does not sabotage relationships through a single mechanism. It operates through several distinct patterns, each with its own texture, its own specific form of damage, its own particular way of making genuine relationship impossible. Understanding these patterns is not simply an intellectual exercise. It is the work of recognition, of learning to identify in real time when the anima is operating rather than the man himself. Because the anima, when it is driving behavior, does not feel like an autonomous inner figure driving behavior. It feels like the man's own most genuine feelings. It feels like what he actually wants, what he actually needs, what he is actually responding to. Learning to distinguish between what he feels and what the anima is producing in him is one of the central challenges and one of the central achievements of genuine male psychological development. The first pattern is idealization, followed by inevitable disappointment. The man who projects his anima onto a woman places her unconsciously on a pedestal that no human being can occupy without eventually falling from it. He needs her to embody qualities, depth, mystery, perfect understanding, the specific quality of presence that the inner figure carries, that belong to an archetypal image rather than to a person. She will inevitably fail to sustain this embodiment, not because she is inadequate, but because no person can be an archetype. The failure will feel, to the man, like a personal betrayal, as if she deliberately withdrew the qualities he fell in love with. What has actually happened is that he is beginning to see her as she actually is. But because he has no framework for understanding the projection, he interprets the dissolution of the image as her failure, rather than as his own unconscious process revealing itself. The second pattern is possession, the anima taking over the man's emotional life and producing moods, behaviors, and reactions that he experiences as his own, but that are actually being generated by the inner figure. When a man is in the grip of an anima mood, he becomes unreasonable in specific ways. Sulky, withdrawn, hypersensitive to perceived slights, prone to sudden shifts between idealization and devaluation of his partner. He may become convinced, without clear evidence, that she does not truly love him. And this conviction will be impervious to reassurance, because it is not responding to the real woman, but to the anima's own fears and needs. The woman in the relationship experiences this as emotional unpredictability, as a man who can be warm and present one day and inexplicably distant and resentful the next, for reasons she cannot identify, and that he, if asked, cannot clearly explain. The third pattern is the muse dynamic, the unconscious requirement that the woman in his life serve as the primary source of his creative and emotional aliveness. A man who has not developed a direct relationship with his own anima depends on the proximity of a woman who carries the projection to access his own depths. When she is present and available and fulfilling the projection, he feels creative, emotionally alive, connected to meaning. When she is absent or distracted or simply present as herself, rather than as the projection demands, he feels flat, disconnected, uninspired. He may not consciously recognize this dynamic. He may experience it simply as being more alive around her. But the woman on the receiving end of it gradually understands that she is being asked to function as a psychological life support system, as the external source of something he has not yet learned to generate from within. The fourth pattern is the anima woman, the specific type of woman the unexamined anima consistently selects for projection. She is almost always, in some way, unattainable or unavailable, committed to someone else, geographically distant, emotionally complex, in ways that make full intimacy difficult, or simply constitutionally unable or unwilling to provide the level of merger the projection requires. The unavailability is not incidental. It is unconsciously required, because full attainment would force the projection to dissolve, would force the man to encounter the real woman rather than the image, would confront him with the gap between what he has been relating to and who she actually is. The longing that unavailability produces is, for the man in the grip of this pattern, more sustaining than possession would be, because the longing keeps the image alive in a way that reality cannot. He is, in a very real sense, in love with the longing itself. No discussion of the anima is complete without an honest account of the mother wound. The specific ways in which a man's early experience of the feminine shapes the anima's character, and, through the anima, shapes every significant relationship he will have with women throughout his life. This is not a discussion about blame. The mother is not responsible for the anima's existence, which is archetypal and would exist regardless of any individual mother's behavior. But she is the primary sculptor of its particular form, the first and most formative influence on how the anima experiences itself, what it expects from the women it encounters, and what psychological temperature it associates with the feeling of being loved. A man whose mother was reliably warm and emotionally present, who saw him clearly without requiring him to perform a particular version of himself for her comfort, will have an anima that is, at its baseline, trusting. This does not mean it will not project. All undeveloped animas project, but the projection will have a quality of openness, a capacity to allow the real woman to gradually replace the image that a more wounded anima may lack. A man whose mother was emotionally unpredictable, available sometimes, withdrawn or volatile at others, will have an anima that is organized around ambivalence. It will be drawn, with uncomfortable reliability, to women who replicate the emotional weather of that original experience. Not because he wants to suffer, but because ambivalence is the emotional signature of love that his anima was formed within. A man whose mother was engulfing, whose love, however genuine, was organized around her own needs rather than his authentic development, who required him to be a particular kind of child to maintain the warmth of her connection, will carry an anima with a specific and particularly complex wound. He will simultaneously long for the depth of merger that the engulfing mother provided and fear the loss of self that merger produced. He will be drawn to women of great emotional intensity and then feel suffocated by that intensity when it arrives. He will push away the very closeness he craves. He will experience genuine intimacy as threatening rather than nourishing, not because intimacy is bad, but because his earliest model of deep intimacy included the loss of his own separateness as part of the price. A man whose mother was emotionally absent, physically present but psychologically elsewhere, unable or unwilling to provide the attunement that genuine emotional development requires, will have an anima that is organized around a specific, pervasive hunger. Picture him as a boy trying to tell her something that matters, something that happened at school, something he felt, something he needs her to receive, and watching her eyes stay slightly elsewhere, her response slightly delayed, her attention never quite arriving at the place where he is. He learns without words that his inner world is not quite real enough to command full presence. He carries that lesson into adulthood as an unconscious conviction, that to be truly seen by a woman would be the most significant thing that could happen to him. And so he will spend his adult life drawn to women who seem to offer precisely that quality of seeing, and will feel inexplicably hollow when the offering turns out to be real rather than the impossible ideal he was seeking. Because what he was seeking was not the thing itself, but the specific intensity of wanting it that has become indistinguishable for him from feeling alive. Working with the mother wound is not the same as blaming the mother, and it is not the same as endless excavation of childhood grievances. It is the specific work of understanding how the earliest relational field shaped the anima's character, and how that character continues to operate in the present, shaping perception and response in ways that have nothing to do with the current woman and everything to do with the original one. A man who understands this clearly is not freed from the anima's influence, but he gains the capacity to recognize, in moments of intense feeling, when the present is being experienced through the template of the past. And that recognition, small as it may seem, is the beginning of genuine freedom from the pattern. Jung observed that the most reliable sign of anima possession in a man is not dramatic behavior but a particular quality of mood, a way of being overtaken by feeling that does not have the transparency of conscious emotion. Conscious emotion has a certain clarity to it. You know why you are sad or angry or afraid, and the emotion, while perhaps difficult, corresponds to something real in your situation. Anima moods are different. They arrive without clear provocation, or with a provocation so apparently minor that the intensity of the response is clearly disproportionate. They have a quality of having been waiting, of using a small present moment trigger to release a much larger accumulated pressure. And they tend, characteristically, to take the form of a conviction about the woman in the man's life. A sudden, felt certainty that she does not truly understand him, or does not truly love him, or is somehow failing him in a way he cannot clearly articulate. The man in the grip of an anima mood does not experience it as a mood. He experiences it as perception, as seeing things clearly for the first time, as having finally penetrated the pleasant surface of the relationship to encounter its hidden truth. The conviction feels more real than his ordinary contentment. It carries an authority that rational reassurance cannot touch. If his partner offers evidence that contradicts the conviction, the evidence does not register, or registers as further evidence of the very thing he is convinced of. This is one of the most frustrating aspects of anima possession for the woman on the receiving end of it. She is being responded to, not as herself, but as a figure in an inner drama, and nothing she actually does or says has any reliable effect on how that drama unfolds. The content of anima moods tends to be organized around a few consistent themes. The theme of not being truly known, the feeling, however irrational, that his partner does not see the deepest part of him, that she relates to a surface version of who he is, while the real version remains unmet and unrecognized. The theme of being trapped, a sudden claustrophobia in the relationship, a feeling of having lost something essential through the commitment of intimacy, a longing for a freedom that the relationship seems to foreclose. The theme of the elsewhere woman, the conviction that there is somewhere a woman who would truly understand him, who would provide what this relationship cannot, who represents the connection that this one, however good, somehow falls short of. These themes are not random. They are the anima's own unfulfilled longings, projected onto the relational situation and experienced as insights about it. One of the most important practices for a man developing a conscious relationship with his anima is learning to recognize these moods as anima communications rather than as accurate perceptions of reality. This does not mean dismissing the feelings. The feelings are real and carry genuine information. It means learning to hold them differently, not as truths about the woman or the relationship, but as messages from the inner figure about something that needs attention in the man's own interior. The mood of not being truly known is the anima communicating that she herself has not been truly known, that the man has not developed a relationship with his own interior depth. The mood of being trapped is the anima communicating that something in the man's own psychological development feels foreclosed. The elsewhere woman is the anima herself, reaching for conscious recognition through the projection of an idealized external figure. Learning to work with anima moods rather than acting them out is one of the most practically demanding aspects of male psychological development. It requires a degree of inner attentiveness that most men have never been taught. The capacity to notice the onset of the mood, to pause before acting on the conviction it produces, and to turn toward the inner figure rather than toward the external woman with the question the mood is really asking. What does this feeling want me to know about my own interior? What is the anima asking for that I have not yet been able to provide directly? These are not easy questions to sit with, especially in the midst of the mood's intensity. But they are the questions that lead somewhere genuinely new, and what they lead toward is not only the resolution of relational difficulty. They lead toward one of the most overlooked dimensions of the anima's presence in a man's life, her role not as a source of suffering, but as the origin of his deepest creative power. The anima is not only a source of relational difficulty, it is also, when its energy is consciously engaged rather than unconsciously projected, one of the most powerful sources of creative vitality available to a man. Jung observed that many of the greatest creative achievements in human history were produced by men who had developed, however incompletely, a conscious relationship with their inner feminine dimension. The poems, the paintings, the symphonies, the philosophical and scientific breakthroughs, these did not emerge from the rational, controlling ego working alone. They emerged from the depths that the anima mediates. And the men who produced them, whatever their other psychological shortcomings, had found some way to access those depths directly, rather than requiring a woman to carry the access for them. The anima in its creative dimension functions as the muse in the original sense. Not the idealized woman who inspires from outside, but the inner figure who opens a man to the unconscious contents that ordinary consciousness cannot access. When a man sits with a creative problem and allows himself to become still, when he tolerates the not knowing that precedes genuine insight, when he permits images and associations to arise without immediately evaluating them, he is, in the Jungian sense, engaging his anima. The quality of receptivity, of waiting, of allowing something to come rather than forcing something out. These are the anima's modes of operation, and the man who has no conscious relationship with his inner feminine is typically cut off from them, dependent on the focused, controlling, goal-oriented modes of the masculine ego that, while powerful in their domain, cannot produce the specific kind of insight that emerges from depth. This is why so many men experience their creative capacity as intimately tied to romantic relationships, why they feel most creative when in love, most blocked when the relationship has soured, most alive to their work when the anima projection is freshly activated. They are not imagining this connection. It is real. What they have not understood is that the creativity is not coming from the woman. It is coming from the anima, the inner figure whose energy the woman's presence has activated. When a man understands this, he gains something of enormous practical importance, the ability to access the anima's creative energy directly without requiring a woman to carry it for him. He does not need to fall in love to access his depths. He needs to develop a relationship with the inner figure that mediates those depths. Jung's method for this direct engagement was active imagination, a practice of entering into conscious dialogue with the inner figures of the unconscious through writing, drawing, painting, or simply attentive inner listening. For the man working with his anima, this means approaching the inner figure as he would approach a real person, with genuine curiosity, genuine respect, genuine willingness to hear what she has to say, rather than what he wishes she would say. The anima approached this way does not simply produce pleasant creative inspiration. She also confronts, she brings the uncomfortable truths that the ego would prefer to avoid, the shadow contents that the persona keeps out of sight, the grief and longing and rage that have been accumulated without acknowledgement. This is why the creative process, when genuinely deep, is also often genuinely painful. The anima does not separate the beauty from the difficulty. She brings them together. The man who has developed a genuine relationship with his anima through this kind of creative engagement undergoes a specific and recognizable transformation in his outer relationships. He becomes less dependent on the woman to carry his aliveness. He can tolerate her absence, her ordinariness, her moments of being fully human in ways that do not serve his need for the extraordinary, because his access to depth is no longer routed entirely through her. He can love the actual woman rather than the image, because he has developed a relationship with the image directly. This does not eliminate projection. Projection is a permanent feature of psychological life, not something that is ever completely overcome, but it reduces the pressure behind the projection, makes it less compulsive, more visible, more available for examination. And that reduction in pressure changes the quality of the relationship in ways that are difficult to describe and impossible to miss. Everything discussed so far has been primarily about the man, about his inner dynamics, his projections, his relationship with his own unconscious feminine dimension. But there is a perspective on this dynamic that is equally important and much less frequently explored. The experience of the woman who receives the projection, understanding what it actually feels like to be the object of an unexamined anima projection, to be loved intensely for qualities that are partly yours and partly in inner figures, to be idealized in ways that feel more like enclosure than appreciation, to be held responsible for a man's emotional aliveness in ways that no person can sustainably fulfill, is essential for understanding why these relationships end the way they do, and what genuine love, as opposed to projection, actually requires. The early experience of receiving an anima projection is often genuinely intoxicating. To be seen with that quality of attention, to be perceived as carrying extraordinary depth, unusual understanding, a specific and rare quality of presence, is not nothing. It can feel like being truly recognized for the first time, like encountering someone who perceives what others have missed, The intensity of his focus, the quality of his feeling, the evident significance he assigns to her presence. These produce a relational warmth that is rare and genuinely compelling. She may feel, in these early stages, that she has finally been truly seen. What she will discover over time is that she has not been seen. She has been cast. The role she has been given is extraordinary. But it is a role, not a recognition. As the relationship progresses and the projection begins to strain against the reality of who she actually is, she will encounter a specific and disorienting form of pressure. The pressure to be more than herself. Not explicitly. Rarely does the man articulate what he needs from her in these terms, but implicitly through his disappointments, his moods, his specific quality of withdrawal when she is simply ordinary, she will understand that something is being required of her that she cannot consistently provide. She may respond by trying harder, by attempting to be more consistently what he needs, by moderating her own ordinariness, by suppressing the parts of herself that do not correspond to the image he carries. Or she may feel a growing resentment at being required to carry something that was never truly hers. Both responses are understandable. Neither resolves the underlying dynamic. The woman who has been the object of intense anima projection and then experienced the dissolution of that projection, who has watched the man's idealization curdle into disappointment, who has been blamed for failing to sustain an image she never agreed to carry, often carries a specific and painful confusion in its aftermath. She knows the love was real. She felt it. She knows something genuine was present in the early connection, but she also knows she was not entirely seen, that some portion of what he loved was an inner figure wearing her face. The grief of this is not the ordinary grief of a relationship ending. It is the grief of having been almost known, of having been close enough to genuine recognition that its absence is particularly acute. Understanding the anima dynamic does not make this grief less real, but it does provide a framework that separates what was genuinely about her from what was about the projection. And that separation, painful as it is, allows her to take back what is hers. The qualities he saw in her, the depth, the sensitivity, the specific way she moved in the world, those were real. They were hers. The image he placed upon those qualities was not, and she can release the image, can refuse to continue carrying it, without releasing the genuine qualities that made the projection possible in the first place. What she is, when the projection is stripped away, is not less than what he saw. In most cases, she is more. She is simply herself, which is always, in the end, more interesting than any image. The integration of the anima is not a project with a completion date. It is an ongoing orientation, a continuously renewed commitment to developing a conscious relationship with the inner feminine dimension, rather than projecting it outward and relating to it through external women. This orientation does not eliminate projection, which is a permanent feature of psychological life. It does not make a man immune to falling in love with the image rather than the person, at least in the initial stages of attraction. What it does is create the conditions under which the projection can be recognized as projection, in which the man can notice the difference between his response to the image and his response to the actual woman, and use that difference as information rather than as a source of disappointment. The first element of anima integration is simply learning to take the inner figure seriously as a figure, to treat the moods, the dreams, the images and fantasies that the anima produces not as noise to be managed or suppressed, but as communications from an aspect of the psyche that has something genuine to say. This requires a degree of inner attentiveness that most men have never been invited to develop. It means noticing when a mood arrives and asking, rather than immediately acting on it, what is this feeling trying to tell me? What does the quality of this emotion, this longing, this irritability, this inexplicable sense that something important is absent, point to in my own interior? These questions do not produce immediate answers, but they establish the habit of internal inquiry that genuine integration requires. The second element is developing a direct relationship with the anima through whatever creative or contemplative practice makes this possible. For some men, this is active imagination in the formal Jungian sense, sitting with the inner figure in a receptive state and allowing a dialogue to unfold. For others, it is writing, journaling, poetry, fiction, in which the inner feminine dimension finds expression. For others, it is music, or painting, or any practice that requires the receptive, non-controlling mode of engagement that the anima's energy supports. The specific form matters less than the consistency. The regular, genuine engagement with the inner figure rather than the reliance on external women to carry that engagement for him. The third element is learning to hold projections lightly, to notice the felt sense of anima projection when it arises in a new relationship, and to use that recognition not as a reason to withdraw, but as a reason to stay curious. The question is not, is this real feeling or just projection? All feeling involves some element of projection. The question is, what in this woman actually corresponds to what I'm feeling, and what am I bringing from my own interior that may not correspond to her at all? Holding this question open, staying curious about the real person while acknowledging the image, is the relational practice that allows both genuine love and ongoing psychological development to occur in the same relationship. The fourth element is grief, the grief of the image that must be released in order for the real woman to be seen. This grief is often unacknowledged because it feels incongruous. Why would a man grieve the dissolution of a projection? But the anima image, however much it has caused him to miss the real woman, has also been a genuine source of beauty and meaning in his life. It has given him access to his own depths. It has produced real creativity and real feeling. Releasing the image in favor of the real woman is a genuine loss, even as it is a genuine gain. Allowing himself to feel that loss, to mourn the figure he was relating to, even as he opens to the person who was always behind it, is part of what makes the transition from projection to genuine love possible. There is a quality that appears in men who have done genuine work with their anima, a quality that is difficult to describe precisely, but unmistakable to encounter. It is not softness in the conventional sense, not the performance of emotional availability, not the anxious attentiveness of a man who has learned that feelings are important and is trying hard to demonstrate that he knows this. It is something quieter and more substantial, a presence that is genuinely receptive without being passive, genuinely feeling without being driven by mood, genuinely related to the woman in front of him without needing her to be anything other than who she actually is. This quality of presence, of being fully there, of genuine contact without agenda, is what the development of the inner anima makes possible in outer relationships. And it is rare enough that the people who encounter it tend to remember it. The man who has developed a conscious relationship with his anima no longer needs the woman to carry his aliveness for him. He has found the source of that aliveness in his own interior, and the woman's presence in his life is no longer structured around the provision of what he cannot provide for himself. This changes the fundamental texture of the relationship. Instead of the unconscious dynamic of the muse and her dependent, there is the possibility of genuine encounter, two people meeting from their own centers rather than from their mutual need for what the other carries. He can love her specificity, her actual qualities, her actual limits, her actual way of moving through the world, rather than loving a generality that she is supposed to embody. The love becomes, in this specific Jungian sense, more personal, more about her, less about him. This does not mean the relationship becomes easier in the conventional sense. Two people meeting genuinely, without the softening distortion of projection, will encounter each other's actual difficulties more directly than two people who are relating primarily to each other's images. But the difficulties that arise from genuine encounter have a different quality than the difficulties that arise from projection. They are about something real. They can be worked with, negotiated, grown through. The difficulties of projection are about something that is ultimately not there, about the gap between an inner figure and a real person, a gap that no amount of relational work can close because it was never a relational problem to begin with. Jung described the goal of anima integration not as the elimination of the inner figure, but as the development of a relationship with her that is conscious, mutual, and ongoing. The anima never disappears. She remains an autonomous dimension of the male psyche across the entire course of a life. But she moves, through the work of integration, from being an unconscious driver of projection and mood to being a genuine inner companion, a source of feeling, intuition, creative depth, and relational wisdom that the man can engage with directly, rather than seeking always in the outer world. She becomes, in the deepest sense of the word, his own, not a stranger he keeps mistaking for the women he loves, but an intimate dimension of himself that he has finally, honestly, come to know. If you have recognized the pattern described in this video, in yourself, in someone you love, in the specific texture of relationships that have always felt almost right and never quite, then you are already in contact with the material that this work requires. The Anima does not ask for perfection. She does not ask for a man who has resolved all his projections before entering a relationship. She asks for honesty, for the willingness to look at the inner figure rather than always through her, to take responsibility for what you bring to the women in your life rather than asking them to carry it, to love the real person standing in front of you rather than the image you have placed upon her. That willingness, sustained over time, with patience and with the grief that genuine inner work always requires, is what makes a man capable of the kind of love that does not need to destroy what it most values. And that love, imperfect, honest, genuinely seeing, is worth every difficult step of the work that leads there.